Every campsite, every camp trip that we took was never at a loss of carrying some sort of gasoline or kerosene.
Welcome to Achieving Failure, a podcast about the adventures of life. I'm your host, Chris, and join us each week as we bring you of autobiographical stories that made us who we are. From the glitz and the glamour to hitting rock bottom, this is Achieving Failure. You too can almost be somebody.
That's when I knew that those kind of activities weren't really meant for me. I wasn't happy ever in that whole thing. I mean, fell asleep during the whole knot tying thing, and camping was stupid. I mean, we lived in Vegas, for Christ's sake. When are you going to go camping? It's hot.
Well, here's the thing. You would have loved to be in my Boy Scout camp.
Well, I figure this is city boy shit. You know, I mean, you can't be a Boy Scout in Vegas. That's stupid.
So,
where you lived, where you could go out and explore. And
So, speaking of Boy Scouts, there was a place called Shepherd's Lake up in Ringwood, New Jersey. It was this big lake. It's a nice little park. And we had, I think it was called like bobsled derby, something like that, where it was kind of a round robin. You go around the lake, but each station had a different thing. Tying ropes, lighting fires, building a lean-to, just all this different shit, and they would judge you on craftsmanship, efficiency, time, materials, blah, 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 like that. But the cool thing was we actually had to build our own literal bobsled. I sled. And again, it would also depend, like, hey, is it snowing this year? We would attach skis. Is it going to be more slushy? We'd attach tires. Mm-hmm. Well, at that particular time, she was more German Shepherd, Norwegian Elkhound. And for fun, we just kind of tied her to the front of the sled, and she just kind of pulled it. And then I guess we realized, oh, well, you're not allowed to do that. But what made it even funnier was one of the stations was you had to build a fire out of kindling, and pretty much you were not allowed to use a lighter, you were not allowed to use matches, but you had to make a fire, whether it be 9-volt battery and wool, things like that. They had 2 little sticks, and you had to burn a piece of rope. We were way far behind in line, and we're like, oh my god, like this thing is this whole rally's being held up. And we're like, fuck it, can we just build this in the snow? And the guy's like, I don't think you're gonna be able to make a fire, but sure, whatever. We dug a hole. We're getting wet tree branches, wet leaves.
Perfect.
And we're building this fire, and then my friend comes over. He goes, hey, I got a little something.
Oh.
Well, the entire time, he's been stashing, like, kerosene in his pocket. So he's dumping kerosene on this fucking thing, and then, woof, this whole fucking thing lights up, and we're like, hey, we made a fire, and we're like, holy shit. Like, not only we're going to give you extra points for, like, burning it in such a quick time, but, like, you built it in the snow. Like, how did you do that? We're like, hey, we just lucked out. We're sticking tree branches and leaves under our armpits to try and dry them. It's just dousing everything with gasoline.
What's all the black smoke coming off of it for?
But it wound up being, or gasoline and or kerosene wound up being our troop's tradition. Nothing in our troop, as far as camping visits, never had every campsite, every camp trip that we took was never at a loss of carrying some sort of gasoline or kerosene. Nubby Bosco was a once a year go to Blairstown, New Jersey, and it was a Boy Scout camp, and you would spend a week in Nubby Bosco, and you would learn all these different skills and get merit badges and blah, blah, blah. And they had the usual reveille. You'd wake up at a certain time in the morning, you go, and they'd raise the flags, and they would have this gigantic, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it was a field. It was a wide open field, and towards the top of one of the fields was 3 flags where they would hoist the American flag and the Boy Scout troop flag and whatever else flag. So this gigantic field was hosted for a lot of different events. So we had a half a football field of this open space with no trees, no nothing. And it was good for flag football, tag, stupid games, soccer, things like that we would play during the week. Pretty much more or less on the off time that we had. It was also really good for testing out a catapult that me and my our Boy Scout troop made. And
was this freelance activities or?
This was for fun. Like, hey, in the morning you have breakfast, you have your morning activities, and then you have like an hour or two for free. You just kind of relax, kind of hang out in your tent.
So instead of doing that, you built a catapult.
So a couple of the guys, and I'm gonna admit I was not part of this. I showed up at the tail end. They built a legit catapult that was not a pull and lever catapult, but it was more you grab the catapult itself, you pull it back, and I mean, I guess, yeah, you kind of locked it into place and they kind of pulled the rope, and the way they made the tension on the rope made the actual catapult itself, the lever arm. So yeah, I guess it was a pull and lever, but this was not a little one. I mean, it required like 7 people to carry this.
Oh, so it had some weight to it.
It took 7 people to carry this out of our campsite 50 feet into this courtyard, because you had your courtyard. And imagine your courtyard almost kind of like a reverse cul-de-sac, where, you know, your cul-de-sac, you have a roundabout, and then your cul-de-sac, you have your street that goes in. Imagine a reverse of that. It was a roundabout, and it branched out. Each branch out was different trails to different campsites. So here we come out looking like some Monty Python bullshit, carrying this massive catapult that had to be 10 feet high. And the way they found, and again, this was just made out of shit that they found in the woods. And they just found a Y-shaped branch that they made a weave out of to hold whatever. And we're launching rocks, we're launching debris, we're launching whatever. And then we start going, well, what if we launch a flaming sponge?
Oh, I see where this is going. This goes back to that story before where your stories never don't have kerosene or gasoline in
I
it.
just happen to have some gasoline. So
there it is.
the other guy, Danny, runs back to the campsite.
The same one that was in the river.
The same one in the river. So Danny was the kerosene man. And
Explains a lot.
we were now launching flaming sponges across this open field, and it was daytime.
An open field of dry grass.
Oh, that's
good.
So the next game that we created was stomp out the forest fire.
You guys turned into firefighters quick.
Not only did we attract other Boy Scout troops that were there for this event, because holy shit, you got this badass catapult, but now it's like, oh shit, we now have to stop a forest fire as this thing kind of just skips across the grass, like just lighting everything on fire.
Every time it hits the ground, it just leaves a
It
patch
really
of
did
kerosene.
every time, and it wasn't like a little spritz. It was like they soaked it in kerosene. So every time it hit the grass, it was a new patch of just fire, and it was one of the most insanely dangerous but impressive pieces of machinery that they created literally out of nothing. And it really came down to, well, you taught me how to build this. You taught me how to build attention. You taught me how to do...
You know, I see a lot of forethought in this. We're going to build something that's probably going to cause a forest fire, but we're going to blame it on what our troops taught us and our leaders. Well, it's your fault.
So one can argue, no, this is completely irresponsible, but at the same time, it was like, well, you taught me how to do knots. I literally went into the woods and I got materials and I created a fully functioning
war machine. That's what you built. Yeah. That's a war machine.
The only thing stopping this from conquering the campsite is like manpower. We need at least 7 to 8 people to carry this. So that was more or less, that was my Boy Scout experience. It was 13-foot bonfires, everything made with kerosene, listening to heavy metal music, making war machines, and underage drinking.
You're going to have to edit the fuck out of this to make an episode. We've gone off the rails so many times. The end here. Knots.
Ta-da!
Hey, it's Chris again. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Come back each week as we dive headfirst into more misadventures. Find us on social media, and if you have a story you'd love to share, shoot us an email at aflvpodcast@gmail.com. That's AF, Achieving Failure, LV, Las Vegas, podcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week.
Well, the entire time he's been stashing like kerosene in his pocket. So he's dumping kerosene on this fucking thing, and then woof, this whole fucking thing lights up, and we're like, hey, we made a fire, and like, holy shit. Like, not only we're gonna give you extra points for like burning it in such a quick time, but like you built it in the snow. Like, how did you do that? We're like, hey, we just lucked out. We're sticking tree branches and leaves under our armpits to try and dry them. It's just dousing everything with gasoline.
Oh, what? That's kind of f***ed up. That's not. What you said is f***ed up. You're rude.